This episode is brought to you by Hasa. Pool Pros. Are you using the new Hasa Pro Rewards app? Earn points on Hasa and render purchases, redeem them for gift cards and product rewards. Download the free Hasa Pro Rewards app today and get rewarded. By the Bottom Feeder. With their new cartridge filter assembly, now you can vacuum dirt in a pool down to 10 microns. Don't just vacuum the pool, finish it.
This episode is brought to you by Skimmer, the #1 pool service software in North America. With Skimmer, you can streamline your schedule, grow your revenue, and keep your customers coming back with 5-star service. Whether you're a one-person operation or an established team, Skimmer is your partner in success. Visit getskimmer.com/poolguy to try Skimmer for free for 30 days.
The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show. Yeah!
Hi, welcome to the Pool Guy Podcast Show. In this episode, I'm going to talk to you about a cleaner for your pool that's really underrated, and it's something that you may consider depending on the type of debris that you have for your pool. And you'll find out more about this, of course, as I go through the podcast, and I'll give you all the ins and outs of this cleaner. But it's one that I really like that is often not on the radar of the pool pro or homeowner. Are you a pool service pro looking to take your business to the next level? Join the Pool Guy coaching program. Get expert advice, business tips, exclusive content, and get direct support from me. I'm a 35-year veteran in the industry. Whether you're starting out or scaling up, I've got the tools to help you succeed. Learn more at swimmingpoollearning.com. So not to keep you in suspense, I'm talking about the Polaris 360 return side cleaner. And they also have something called the TR36P, which I've reviewed also on my YouTube channel. It's basically just kind of an updated body for the Polaris 360. And, it may be worth to get something a little more stylish. You may just want to get the standard Polaris 360. Now, when I first started using this cleaner, I really didn't know anything about it. I mean, we have Polaris pressure cleaners here in my area, not that many Polaris 280s. I actually had some really old Polaris 180s on my pool route for a long time, replaced with Polaris 280s, and I didn't really know the difference between a booster pump pressure side cleaner and a return side cleaner. And ironically enough, the first one I actually tried was not the Polaris 360. It was the Pool Vernugen return side cleaner, and Hayward probably could have kept this one on the market when they bought the pool cleaner from Pool Vernugen. But there were a few issues with this model, and I'm not going to deny that their suction side cleaner was much better than their pressure side or return side jet cleaner. So that was the first one I tried, and I was kind of turned off to the fact that this didn't work too good. But I learned a lot about the difference between a pressure side booster pump cleaner and a return side cleaner from my experience installing this. And this kind of course, applies to the Polaris 360 as well. The main difference is that a pressure side cleaner has a dedicated booster pump that the builder puts in when they build the pool. It's harder to put this in afterwards, although you can convert a suction side port to a return port with a little replumbing at the equipment area. That's very possible. But if there's no side port whatsoever, putting in a pressure cleaner is quite difficult. And so these are installed at the build typically and not put in afterwards. And the booster pump pressure cleaner, there's a dedicated line that the booster pump draws some water from the main system. And this powers the pressure side cleaner extremely well, by the way, allowing the cleaner to move through the pool probably 3 times, 4 times faster than a suction side cleaner can move, maybe even more. And it picks up leaf debris, and with a sand silt bag, fine dirt. And they're highly effective in areas where you have large leaf debris, because the opening is about, 1.5, 2 inches in diameter, depending on which model pressure cleaner you're using. So the opening is 5 times, 6 times bigger than a suction side cleaner opening for sure. Interesting enough, this is something that they really should be promoting with the pressure side cleaners. Like if I was working for Polaris, I would be marketing this thing as like the beast of cleaners. The opening is 5 times. They could do the math and figure out how much larger the opening is. They could do the math and how fast the cleaner moves around the pool. Because if you have pressure cleaners on your pool route, you know that the booster pump only needs to be set for like 2 hours a day to do the same thing that a suction cleaner does over 8 or 10 hours during that day. So this allows the pressure cleaners to be more robust as far as longevity. They're only running 2 hours a day versus 10 or 12 hours. They last longer. In my opinion, they're much more efficient in cleaning because they get the larger debris. But of course, it requires the builder to put them in at the build for you to have one of these. So the Polaris 360 comes in, and this is actually what's called a return side cleaner. It works off of your current return jets that are in the pool without a booster pump. Now, of course, there are a few things that are going to, I wouldn't say be a drawback, but I'm just going to say it's going to be different than a pure pressure cleaner. The first thing to note is that since it's connected to a return jet, there's more to installing this than just plugging it into a return jet and then turning it on. Most pools in my service area have 2 or 3 return jets, maybe even more, 4 or 5 return jets, depending on how big the pool is. The return jets aren't necessarily in optimal positions in the pool, like dead center. A lot of times you're close to the center, but sometimes your return jets are in the shallow and deep end. Also, if you have more than just one dedicated line like the pressure cleaner has, you have to kind of modulate the return, directing it to the Polaris 360 jet that you're connected to. That means closing off a return line possibly, or adding restrictor eyeballs. These are eyeballs that have like a little pinhole in it, or maybe more than a pinhole, but the diameter of the hole is smaller than a regular eyeball return jet. And sometimes there's a spa return with the spa bypass that you can't really do much with. So there's water going into the spa and spilling over. There's multiple return jets. And then there's the return jet you're connecting the Polaris 360 to. Now let me back up for a moment and mention one more caveat with the Polaris 360, or actually 2 more. The first one is you need to have 1.5-inch threaded return lines, which a lot of pools do have that. So most pools don't have stub pipes. They have the 1.5-inch return lines. And then at that point, you're good to go with the Polaris 360. The other thing is I would advise you to have a large type pool filter for the Polaris 360 to work effectively, because there is some back pressure, and I'll go over that in a minute. But I wouldn't say that you could run this off a 100 square foot cartridge filter or 150 square foot cartridge filter as effectively as running it off a full-size D filter, a full-size sand filter, and a quad type cartridge filter setup because of the back pressure. The reason why there's some back pressure is because you're going to be restricting some return lines and directing it to the Polaris 360 return line through the hose into the cleaner. So of course there's going to be some restriction of the return line, causing the pool's pressure to go up maybe 3 or 4 psi on the gauge. So let me just explain this by an example. Let's say you have a 60 square foot DE filter connected to your pool. When it's clean, it's at 20 psi, and then you connect the Polaris 360 to your return jet. You restrict one jet, and you put a restricted eyeball in the other one. So you plug one jet, put a restricted eyeball in another one. So when you turn on your pool pump, the filter psi will actually be at 23 psi because you're pulling more water from the pump than you're able to return to the pool. And the Pool Guy Podcast Show has teamed up with UPA to bring you affordable, reliable liability insurance starting at just $64 a month. Get up to $2 million in coverage, and the members of my coaching group get an even lower rate. Protect your business and your peace of mind. Sign up with UPA today by clicking the link in the podcast description. One thing you have to note is that this inherently is not a dangerous situation if the PSI goes up 3 or 4 on the full-size filter. In my opinion, that's just a normal back pressure. Of course, you can have a situation where it goes up 5 or 6 psi. Then you have to kind of maybe unrestrict the jet and give more flow back to the pool. There's also a flow regulator at the connector, the quick disconnect for the Polaris 360 that you can also adjust open. So let's say you have, and I'm giving you this kind of minutia because it's really important. Let's say you have a pool with 3 return jets. This is very typical. I'll connect the Polaris 360 to the return jet closest to the center of the pool if possible. Then I will plug one return jet. This is my normal setup. I'll plug up one return jet entirely, turn it off, and then turn everything on and see how it works. In some cases, that's all I need to do, and the Polaris 360 has enough power to move around the pool with no problems. There are other setups where I've had to not plug up one jet, but put 2 restrictor eyeballs in 2 jets, leave them flowing still, but with restrictor eyeballs in them. And rarely will you have to do one plug, one restrictor eyeball, and then the Polaris 360 connected, because that may be a little bit too much flow restriction for the pool return line, and it's not going to move a lot of water on the surface. So the setup is really important, and it's something that you have to decide on before you even purchase a Polaris 360. Look at the pool that you're thinking about putting it in. Does it have 3 or 4 return jets? If so, you're in good shape. If it has 2 return jets, I would be a little leery that this is going to work effectively, because it doesn't give you a lot of jets to play with, so to speak, and reduce flow from one jet or plug up one jet. So that may not be the ideal pool with 2 return jets. If it has a spa spillway, you can actually do some more adjusting by letting some return go to the spa spillway, more return to the spa spillway, and alleviate some of the back pressure. So this is really important to understand, that the setup is not plug it into the return line, turn on your pool, and the Polaris 360 is going to work effectively. It just doesn't work like that in most pool setups. You'll have to put it onto a return line, possibly plug up one return jet, or possibly restrict 2 return jets, or possibly plug one return jet and increase the spa spillway flow so the Polaris 360 can run without too much back pressure. It's definitely not a deal breaker, but it's really important information on this cleaner before you even decide to get it and set it up. Another thing to note is that even though it's connected to a return line, the skimmer is not really impacted by this. In other words, if you had a suction side cleaner and you didn't have a side port and you connected it at the skimmer, you would have to share the suction with the suction side cleaner and the skimmer at that point. But even though the skimmer has still full power to pull in debris, because of the configuration of using one return line for the Polaris 360 and maybe turning off one return line, or plugging up one return line, I should say, or restricting a return line, you're going to find that the surface debris can be a little bit of an issue now, because the return lines don't just return water to the pool, they actually move the water in a pattern to bring the debris into the skimmer. So just be aware that you're not going to have as much surface movement of the water to direct debris into the skimmer. Now again, not a deal breaker, but you may notice that you have more surface debris than you had prior to installing the Polaris 360, and that's pretty much normal because of the restriction you're doing with the return jets, and the fact that return jets actually help push debris into the skimmer. Also, the parts are going to wear out more than a standard pressure cleaner because it's running 8 or 10 hours a day and not just 2 hours a day. So, of course, the person telling you this at the pool store is not going to mention all these things because they might not even know about these things. You won't even see this on Amazon either, I don't think. So I'm telling you all this so that you are prepped for the cleaner. And if everything checks out to where you can install this cleaner, the benefits of having the Polaris 360 far outweigh these kind of drawbacks that I'm mentioning here. The benefit is you're going to have a cleaner that operates a lot like a pressure cleaner, has a large debris opening, picks up a lot of large leaf debris in the pool. It's going to leave the pool very clean compared to a pool with a suction cleaner connected maybe at the skimmer or even the side port. It's going to be night and day in a lot of cases when you install the Polaris 360 at your service accounts. I'll give you a couple examples of successful installations of this. A pool that I had where it had a bunch of small little bamboo leaves all in the pool. Bamboo was all on one side of the pool. In fact, I think in my installation video, you see this pool. I can't remember which one I used. So these bamboo leaves would fall in the pool. Any suction cleaner would be full, like, clogged up by running over a pile of these, because the leaves don't necessarily fall as individual leaves. They'll fall as a cluster sometimes. And so the Polaris 360 was perfect for this pool. It actually had a return jet directly in the center, which made it easy to install. And since it had a large debris bag on top and a large opening, it left the bottom of the pool spotless every week. It picked up every bamboo leaf there. The skimmer, of course, was slightly impacted because of the return jet restriction. However, I also had a solar surface cleaner in this pool, so there was really no issue with the Polaris 360 in this pool, and it was night and day after the installation. Another pool had very large pod-like droppings. I'm not sure what tree this was. I can't identify it. I probably could if I researched it. But these would clog up the suction cleaner instantly. It would fit right into the throat of the suction cleaner, and the suction cleaner would stop all week. Polaris 360 running on the bottom picked all these up, no problem. The debris bag was completely full. In fact, the debris bag actually kind of tipped over a little bit on the side. It would come unclipped sometimes. It was so heavy with these droppings from the tree that even though there's a clip that holds it to the hose, it would come off and fall over into the pool. That's how much debris it picked up. Problem solved. So for pools with certain type of heavy debris where a suction cleaner is just not cutting it, you can of course fix the surface problem with a surface cleaner, and it'll get all the surface debris. But you really can't fix the bottom of the pool problem with a suction cleaner. You can't get a suction cleaner with a 2-inch opening. And so this is the solution. If you have a pool that has a suction cleaner that's always getting clogged up with debris, the pool has 1.5-inch return lines, 3 to 4 return jets optimal, a full-size filter, a return jet somewhere near the center, but that's not typically necessary, but it's better. You can connect it to the deep end and also to the shallow end, which I've done before. And the pool with heavy debris will be something that this will solve the problem if you can't use a traditional pressure cleaner if you don't have the booster pump connected. So there's a really good segment of pools where the Polaris 360 would be perfect for. And if your pool fits these parameters, I wouldn't hesitate to get the Polaris 360. You're going to love how the pool looks, and it's going to be highly effective in your pool for that reason. Now, if the pool has smaller debris and doesn't really have a big, huge debris problem, I wouldn't get this cleaner. I would just get a regular suction side cleaner and call it a day. This is for those pools where the debris load is much heavier and a suction cleaner is not effective in that pool. If you're looking for other podcasts, you can find those by going to my website, Swimming Pool Learning. On the banner, click on the podcast icon. There'll be 2,000 podcasts for you to download and listen to at your leisure. And if you're interested in the coaching program, you can learn more at poolguycoaching.com. Thanks for listening to this podcast. Have a great rest of your week, and God bless. This episode is brought to you by Hasa, providing products that deliver clean, healthy water for every aspect of everyday life. The bottom feeder battery-powered vacuum system, portable, powerful, and only weighs 12 pounds. And Skimmer. Get Skimmer, America's #1 pool service software. Podcast listeners can try Skimmer for free at getskimmer.com/poolguy.